17 that Christ sent him not to baptize, but to preach the gospel. In effect, Paul is saying Jesus lied. Either that, or Paul is rewriting the script and has usurped the leadership of Jesus in Christianity. On page 156 of volume 7 in Thomas Jefferson's works, our third president and one of America's founding fathers makes the following relevant comment. Quote, "Of this band of dupes and impostors, Paul was the first corrupter of the doctrines of Jesus." The eighth question addresses one of those problems that is systematically evaded by nearly all apologists. The latter take great delight in distorting and perverting complementary verses that can somehow be related to Jesus. Indeed, they have made quite a specialty of this. But they have intentionally avoided all negative verses that could just as easily be applied to the founder of Christianity. For example, the New Testament repeatedly refers to Jesus as the Son of Man. But one need only read the Old Testament to see that the Son of Man is often referred to in the most uncomplimentary fashion. For instance, Psalm 146:3 states, quote, "Put not your trust in princes, nor in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help." That's right. No help is to be expected from Jesus. And Job 25:6 says, quote, "How much less man that is a worm, and the Son of Man, which is a worm." The Son of Man is a worm. Would you follow a worm? One would have far less difficulty applying these verses to Jesus than many vague allusions that have been deemed forecasters of his presence. Nearly all of the latter are of no relevance. On page 258 in his theological works, Thomas Paine spared no words in this regard when he said, quote, "I have now gone through and examined all the passages which the four books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John quote from the Old Testament and call them prophecies of Jesus Christ. When I first sat down to this examination, I expected to find some cause for censure, but little did I expect to find them so utterly destitute of truth and of all pretensions to it," unquote. Biblicists have gone through the Old Testament and taken what can be used for purposes of expediency to prove their case and systematically ignored all the rest. However, when Psalms and Job refer to the Son of Man as a worm, in whom there is no help, they are intentionally avoided. There is no reason they could not apply to Jesus other than the fact that the image of Christianity is found to be tarnished immense. Last for today, which often refers to Christian theology, Jesus. But how could this be true? He repeated that he was not equal. In John 14:28, Jesus said, "My Father is greater than I." John 20 said, "To my Father and your Father, to my God." 7:16, he said, "And is not mine, his that sent me." In every instance, Jesus is denying God's equal. Why would anyone who is God's equal, God is greater than himself, recognize the Father? He is God. The Trinity is one of the most ludicrous ideas come down the pike. Even apologists admit it's impossible to comprehend. Page 41 in the book entitled "The Bible Has the Answer," apologist Morris and Clark state, "The mystery of the divine human nature of Christ is beyond our finite understanding. This Bible simply presents as fact that Jesus Christ was both man and God. It does not try to explain how this can be because it is inexplicable, that's for sure. It must be apprehended on faith alone." Without going into an extended analysis of the Trinity, let us conclude our brief comments on this topic by noting some astute observations made by Robert Ingersoll in the last century. On pages 266 and 267 of Volume 4 in his works, he says the following, quote, "Christ, according to faith, is the second person of the Trinity, and the Father being the first, and the Holy Ghost the third. The Holy Ghost is neither Father nor Son, but both. The Son was begotten by the Father, but existed before he was begotten, just the same before as after. Christ is just as old as his Father, and the Father is just as young as his Son. Imagine a father and son being of the same age. So it is declared the Father is God, the Son is God, and the Holy Ghost is God, and all three gods make one God. And Ingersoll concludes by saying, nothing ever was, nothing ever can be more perfectly idiotic than the absurd doctrine of the Trinity. The Trinity and all the problems associated with Messianic prophecy will be outlined in greater detail in subsequent programs. That completes our presentation, and please join us later for the 4th edition of Biblical Errancy Commentary, when we'll continue discussing our pamphlet and showing why the Bible is nothing more than the flawed composition of some fallible human beings. Thank you for listening.